Hello and welcome back to the Emotionless podcast. My name is Logan, and as always, I'll be your host. Welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is actually the start of a pretty big series that I want to be doing on this channel, talking about my experience with Title IX. Title IX is kind of a hard thing to talk about because it involves some kind of ruining your ASMR. I'm good at that. Sorry, I'm just getting like a more exact Title IX is so that I can explain it in the most professional and proper terms for you guys, because I don't want to give you guys any kind of misinformation, because I feel like that's just not okay. And anybody who does that is just not a good person. Anybody who willingly goes out there and spreads misinformation, not a good person. Don't trust them. Don't vibe with them. They're not going to do good things for you. So, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, OCR, and other statutes, the Title IX of Education Amendments of 1972. Title IX protects people from discrimination based on sex in education programs or activities that receive federal financial assistance. So, basically, Title IX is protecting you from sexual discrimination, sexual assault, sexual harassment, anything like that, anything that falls under that branch. I think Title IX is a pretty dang big umbrella that holds a lot of different raindrops under it, but, we're just going to talk about my experience with it, what happened, how it was handled, the whole situation, everything like that. So I want to go ahead and start this episode by mentioning a very strong trigger warning for those of you who may have experienced issues with Title IX, or who may have experienced issues with, and I apologize, I'm going to use some strong words here, so please brace yourself, with being raped or having rape problems, being sexually harassed, being sexually assaulted, sexually discriminated against, either for your orientation or your gender, or what you identify as. I want you to know that the Emotionless podcast and our team is always going to be a loving, safe environment, and we will never do anything that will purposely harass or hurt somebody, because we're not about that. I will be mentioning some people in this video, but all of their names will be changed to protect their identity, because regardless of how I feel about them at this moment, that doesn't change how I'm going to handle this situation. I'm still going to handle it with the most professional dignity and grace that I possibly can, because it's not my place, regardless of my role in this story. It is not my place to bash people or say this person is a horrible person, this person did this person did that. I'm here to tell you the facts, tell you exactly what happened, tell you my experience, tell you how it made me feel, tell you how it affected my friends and family, and that's it. I'm not going to give you my opinions about it. I am going to give you a couple opinions on how I think the school that opened and processed the case handled it, but I'm not going to give you opinions on how either the complainant or the respondent acted, or how any of my friends acted, because that's not my place. That's not my thing to do. And I'm not here to do that, because that's just not professional. That's not okay. And I'm just not going to tolerate that. So, Title IX is a really hard subject because people define Title IX in all different ways. And what I think it should be used for, personally, is when a person has unwanted sexual activities happen to them that they've made very clear that they both do not consent to, or did consent and no longer consent to. It is a-okay to withdraw consent at any time, as long as you make it very, very clear that you are withdrawing consent. You can't be like, oh, stop that. Because that could very easily be taken as messing around, playing around, horsing around. Like the same way you're like, oh my God, stop it, you're such a bitch. I think that if you are not making it very clear and then the person continues it, you don't have a right to get upset at them if you haven't made it very clear. Now, if you get upset at them and in the process make it clear, that's a different story. But if you just go for weeks and weeks and weeks without saying a word and make this person think that everything they did was okay and acceptable, that's just not okay. Sorry, my dog's barking. You're going to hear a lot of background noise. I don't really have an insulated room, so I turned off my air conditioner to try to make the quality as good as possible, but we work with what we got here. We are not a professional podcast by any means. So, I just want to, again, give that trigger warning that if you are at all affected, have been affected, or anything like that by sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape, sexual discrimination, gender discrimination, LGBTQ issues, you are not going to want to watch these series because it may trigger you, and that's the last thing I want. I don't want any of my viewers to be triggered. I want you guys to feel like this is a safe place where you can hear my experience, hear my stories, ask questions, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. There's some questions that I unfortunately will not be able to answer, and that is just for the protection of the witnesses and other parties involved in this story, because I don't think that's fair to them to do that to them. So this first part is going to be like kind of the backstory behind me and this other individual's relationship, and give you some more backstory as to what our relationship was before we get into the juicier part of the story. So I'm going to call this girl Claire. That seems like a good name. I don't know. It's just the first thing that popped in my head. So I met Claire in August of 2019, and I'll never forget the story of how I met her. And I think it's actually kind of interesting story. So I'm going to tell it to you guys. So I saw Claire standing there, and she looked a little lost. She was wearing a pink shirt. I'll never forget it. And, so I walked over to her. I'm like, hey, are you okay? You look a little lost. And she's like, I'm trying to, wait for my Uber, but, I don't know where they are. And they hadn't arrived yet, but, she thought they had because the app was being weird, because it's Uber. The app's always weird. And sorry, I'm trying to blow my breath the other way so it doesn't make a bunch of noise into the microphone. So, I stand there with Claire. I try to help her find her Uber. We eventually find it. We have a little conversation between them. I don't really remember the juicy details. I just remember that part. And I think, all right, well, that was a girl. Never going to see her again in my life. I don't really think anything too heavily of this interaction, because I don't know. I don't think it was an interaction to think heavily of. I don't think there was anything to think heavily about. I don't know. So later in that day, we're having because this is my orientation at college, and we're having an orientation meeting where there's this local theater near us. I think it's called the Tropic Theater. This college was in Leesburg, Florida. I don't really care if anybody knows that. Please don't send hate to this college, by the way. The individuals who improperly handled this have been terminated. And I don't think the school deserves hate because they trained individuals correctly and the individuals incorrectly handled the situation. I don't think that's their fault. So this individual, so we go over to this theater, and Claire waves over at me, and she's sitting with in generally the middle of the theater. She's sitting with James and Harry. That's what we're gonna call them. And I'll probably forget that later and call them something different, but just follow along as best you can. So she's sitting with James and Harry, and they are just talking, and she calls me over. She's like, hey, come sit with me, come sit over with us. And I'm like, okay, I'll come sit with you. And, immediately she asked me for my Snapchat. She's like, I like you. You're a really cool dude. I want to be friends with you. And I'm like, okay. I did think that this was a little forward and a little weird, but, I suppose to each their own. Whatever floats your boat, as they say. And so in the process of just hanging out, I tell her, a little bit about me, blah, 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 blah. And, we're sitting, and, the orientation leaders are trying to be funny. They're trying to, get us excited because everyone's a little nervous to be there. It's your first experience in college. Who isn't going to be a little bit nervous? And I remember feeling uncomfortable, but I felt uncomfortable, and I think that wasn't anything to do with Claire. I don't think by any means that was anything to do with James, Harry, or Claire. I really don't. I think that I was just uncomfortable because it was my first time at college and I was scared. And I was also excited. I was so excited that I had already met people because, I'd left all my friends back home and I had nobody. I was by myself. And I think I was excited and scared because I didn't want to be completely alone, I didn't want to not have friends. Because there's no fun in that. And, they always say you make the best friends in college. And I think to some extent I did. Some of my friends are still best friends, but I've also made some of my worst enemies. And, I'll talk about other stories like that, but this is like the biggest story. So I sat with her and, immediately she looks me up and down. I'll never forget this. And she goes, and like she's making some swishing noises in her mouth, and she goes, "There's something about you. There's something about you, and I can't put my paw on it." She said, "I can't put my paw on it." I'm like, "I'm sorry?" She goes, "There's something different about you. You're not like everyone else here." And I'm like, "I'm autistic. Is that what you're looking for?" And she's like, "That's not it." She looks me up and down, looks at what I'm wearing, looks at my hair, kind of like turns her head and does that little camera thing. "You're gay, aren't you?" she says. I'm like, "What? You're gay. That's what it is. You're gay. You like dick." And I'm just like, oh boy, here goes high school all over again. And I'm like, "No," in like the most lying voice possible because I'm as gay as they come. I fucking am all about dick and fuck pussy. And she's like, "That's it. You're gay. I know it. I knew you're gay. You're going to be my gay best friend. I can already tell." And that stigma of you have to have a gay best friend to be something has always kind of bothered me because I'm just like, who cares? Can I just be your best friend, not your gay best friend? Like, although I do hype that up sometimes. So I always hype my girlies up. And so my original plan in college was always to hide it and get people to know me for me before learning I'm gay and just want to be my gay best friend. But that kind of fell through the roof pretty quickly, within a matter of literal hours. But, I did the best I could to try to hide it. And I think she just had some kind of super sense gaydar because I couldn't really understand why she had realized this so quickly. But maybe it's just obvious. And nowadays it's definitely obvious. This was when I was 18. I'm 21 now. So a lot has changed. But I always found it funny that how she figured out how gay I was so quickly. This was the backstory part 1. Thank you for watching. Please tune in to our next episode and the rest of this series. They'll all be linked together in a playlist once I get them all recorded and uploaded. I hope you enjoyed. As always, please make sure to follow us on social media and have a great rest of your day.